This is a warning because this video will be very heavy. And with all due respect, you do not have to watch this video. Go take care of yourself. Go hug your cat, take your medicine, drink some water, eat some food that you haven't been eating in a while, and be sure to love yourself. Donald Trump and Mike Pence has exited their seat in power as Joe Biden and Kamala Harris claim that seat. I've already made a piece on the Biden-Harris administration. For that one is in the description. Today, I want to grieve for the pain that not only I went through these last 4 years, but also the people whom I share a planet with. I dedicate this piece to my family, my mother, my stepfather, my cop uncle, my aunt, and my grandfather. The only person not complicit in my family is my grandmother, who is too keen on the nonsense that occurred in the last 5 years, which include the campaign in 2016 and the presidency of Donald Trump. Let us call what Donald Trump is and what his legacy was a fascist regime. Let us remember that his followers genuinely believe that Pinochet was a great leader, that the Holocaust wasn't enough, that shooting people in the streets was justified in achieving their ends. Yet somehow, they've attempted so diligently to name Black Lives Matter and anti-fascist as common enemies of the people, or more accurately, to scapegoat them as terrorists. They spent the past 4+ years and counting to name us terrorists. Even I was visited by the secret services from my own YouTube channel being critical of ICE, the police state, and Donald Trump. The Department of Homeland Security visited Second Thought for his anti-American content on YouTube, which has almost a deserved 1 million subscribers. I have not forgotten J20, where anti-fascists took to the streets to resist the inauguration of President Trump. I want to draw a particular distinction. Private and public property was damaged on J20, to which the police arrested anti-fascists and journalists. Yet on J6, the police were absolutely complicit with the violence that occurred during the fascist coup, many of whom were outright involved in the coup itself. This is a particular display of authority, where the state values private property over the well-being of its people. What would happen if the anti-fascist went to the extreme to stop Donald Trump from taking office? Let us explore that concept, and by no means is this a definitive list. 1. There would be no Keystone XL and Dakota Access Pipeline. 2. There would be no waste of funding and taxpayer dollars on a pointless and useless fucking wall that is really just a hate symbol towards asylum seekers and people of color. 3. While concentration camps were already here in the United States, there would be no separation of families, as well as missing children who were drugged in the perverted ICE detention centers. 4. There wouldn't have been a fucking conspiracy theory called QAnon, which requires the complete abandonment of common logic to accept, which is putting it lightly, if I'm being honest. 5. The sheer dogmatic concept of authoritarian fascism wouldn't have been legitimized into power. 6. The endless lies and poisoning of the well of information spread around about countless important issues, including, but especially not limited to, COVID-19. Again, this is not covering everything, but a list of things that cross my mind. Feel free to list some more below. But one important thing to recognize is that Donald Trump's politics were fascist. To call Donald Trump just a Republican is not productive, unless you understand that the Republican Party, as well as the GOP, are also fascist. To put it very accurately, Donald Trump is in fact a white, ultra-nationalistic Christo-fascist by every sense of the word. His people, quote-unquote, which he commonly refers to as the American people, were absolute fascists and outspoken Nazis. We have warned you all, and none of you dog shit fuckers listened. We have expressed to you the uprising of Nazi riots in our own neighborhood. We have warned you of the constant dog whistling and virtue signaling Trump utilized to garner a violent death cult following. You should be ashamed and afraid that the most powerful human in existence sees you as a pawn in his own game to not only seek power, but to sacrifice the lives he steps on for his own personal gain. You should be upset that the people are sick and dying because of this fool's negligence. You should be upset that this motherfucker in power used his military authority to call in the U.S. Marshals to execute an anti-fascist by the name of Michael Reynolds, who defended a Black Lives Matter rally from violent Hawaiian punch fascists like the Patriot Prayers. You should be upset that members of Congress, outspoken white supremacists, Nazis, far-right militia goons, far-right YouTube celebrities, multi-million-dollar business owners, bankers, and even members of Trump's own staff and legal team encouraged an overthrow of democracy. Despite our democracy being a complete shambles as it is, considering that this person voted into office has almost identical policies, going as far as to claim Donald Trump was the one who wanted to defund the police to emphasize that he didn't want to himself, the Nazis wanted to overthrow that too. With all of this clusterfuck in mind, the Trump regime was exactly about instilling a fascist dictatorship. We told you. We warned you. We knew exactly what happened in the Weimar Republic, the Spanish Civil War, the overthrow of the Chilean government via US CIA coup, the brown shirts of Italy, the 100-year-long imperialist enslavement of Guatemala, the overthrow of Iran to instill the Shah to access Persian oil, British petroleum. Everything was repeated here on steroids. There should not have been a debate about whether or not Trump was a fascist. There should not have even been a debate on whether or not fascism should be accepted. As the NRA would have said in an alternative universe, it should have been, quote, met with a clenched fist of truth, end quote. It is plainly clear as day that the police response during the J6 riot was less aggressive of a response from the National Guard compared to the J20 protest and Black Lives Matter protests. While I don't advocate for police force, the fact that the National Guard is asleep on the job compared to the presence of Black Lives Matter and anti-fascist protests within the last few years can be easily observed as a contradiction in the state apparatus itself. It is important to recognize that law enforcement were present at the J6 attempted coup on the side of the fascists and Nazis. It is important to remember that the elected head of the NYPD's police union was a QAnon pusher. Let us not forget the death of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and the thousands of names of black people who died in the hands of law enforcement. Let us remember who the enemy is: the state, the police, the fascists, the Nazis, and everyone who worked in hand with them complicitly. The state in the last 4 years, if it hasn't been obvious enough, is an illegitimate tool for social control and protection of property rather than the safety of humankind. This is why, in the last 10 years, I have been consistently an anarchist. This regime was what the state has been building up towards the entire time. A white supremacist nation. The United States is a white supremacist nation. Always has been, always will be, until its collapse through the failing of the capitalist system. Understand that Joe Biden being elected into office will not see the end of these boogaloo fucking goons. This is why I do not believe the notion that this is not what the United States is. The United States is very much this system. And what reforms can be implemented in the next 4 years will not prevent another Donald Trump and Mike Pence being elected into office. Dare I say, someone far worse is bound to come into office and destroy this world. I want to speak to my family, as I had mentioned earlier. As I speak on my emotions about the Trump-Pence regime, I wish to express the following. How fucking dare you? You willingly and obediently voted in a white Christo-fascist into office and made us suffer with its repulsive nonsense. Never have my mental illness declined so far into the gutter, and because of the actions of the people that I share blood with, the same people who voted for Trump and Pence are the same people who chanted blood and soil in Charlottesville, Virginia, the same people who constantly use their vehicles to run people over, the same people who paraded the death and separation of immigrant families, not to mention the consistent monopoly of media that Trump maintained, so we could listen to his goddamn mouth run like a rudder every fucking day. Some of you continue to wonder why I moved across the country. The answer is obvious. You were all aware of the struggle I had growing up as an autistic, deaf child struggling with dysphoria, bulimia, and social anxiety. You watched and even forced me to assimilate to a society that wanted to see me bleeding in the gutter at school. You witnessed seeing me outright discriminated in the school system by the very staff who not only neglected my suffering, but also encouraged it. You also told me life would get better after this. Yet as an adult, I was slowly coming out as trans, and I witnessed you supporting a fucker who not only mocked a disabled reporter in dog-whistling Lügenpresse, fake news, but also rolled back legislation protecting trans people and the queer community from discrimination in the workforce, sexual assault, and the implementation of baseless gendered bathroom laws. Meanwhile, you voted in an administration that fostered a cunt of a Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos, who not only defunded the education system, but also pulled back laws protecting children from sexual assault in the school system. To my family, I must ask you this extremely important question. Is rape okay to you? Is it okay to rape children like Donald Trump did to the endless women who spoke up to tell their stories? Are you one of the crooked ass buffoons who believe that rape can cancel a pregnancy? Are you one of these people who are pro-life but support the concentration camps that Donald Trump accelerated into an American-style gulag? I hope that you all can at least reflect on the damage that you all took part in, causing all of us in the last 4 years. Many of your excuses, which was really pitiful by the way, was that Hillary Clinton was as crooked as Donald Trump. A garbage opinion for voting for Trump. In 2016, I took a stance. I refused the vote because of the absurd dichotomy of that particular election. You did not see me vote for a fucking pedophile nor an imperialist war criminal. You have blood on your hands, and the reasons why I don't show up to your family events anymore should loudly resonate with you. If family was so important to you, then you wouldn't treat politics in the same manner as sports teams, or a debate on whether or not pineapple goes on pizza. To the police officer that is my uncle, fuck you especially. I know what side of history you're on. As your specialty is quote-unquote counterterrorism, none of your garbage quote-unquote intelligence could have foreseen the events that took place on January 6th, the Kyle Rittenhouse shooting in Kenosha, the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, the rise of armed far-right militias literally a year ago from today in Richmond, Virginia, or, let's not forget, the riots in Berkeley, California. Even in your own neighborhood, you had Trump supporters pointing firearms at black children. I understand what your focus is, which is to support the ethno-state that is Israel, to colonize and erase the Palestinian land and people. Palestine was a melting pot, in every sense of the word, in the Ottoman Empire, with a vast array of cultures in Arabic society, until Zionists begun invading villages and slaughtering innocent civilians in the name of some Old Testament horseshit, creating a revisionist history that Jewish people are exclusively white. It's a burden on our society that when I called out white nationalists infiltrating law enforcement, even by the FBI's own account, you flat out deny the reality of the situation to protect your drinking buddies who showed up to the Capitol on January 6, 2021. As a leftist, I want to talk to the liberals. Do you truly believe you understand the damage caused by Donald Trump? I don't believe you do, and neither does any politician you support do either. I'd like to hearken back to the Obama administration, whom which Biden was the vice president under, in case you don't remember. At the time of Obama's departure, he was the current record holder for the most bombs dropped on other countries, but admittedly, that would be easily surpassed by Trump. It's not really something to brag about when your president was only the second worst in terms of foreign affairs, considering that George W. Bush was the one that instigated the war on terror and the U.S. invasion and occupation of the Middle East, whom Obama did not pull out of. It is also not worth bragging about the notion that Obama was a sitting duck during the U.S. and corporate invasion of the Standing Rock Reservation, until Trump took office, signing in an action to drive out the water protectors simply to build a pipeline that would predictably leak. Liberals do have blood on their hands as well for their complicity of the neoliberal motions of the IMF, World Bank, and WTO, which garners primary interest in profiteering the exploitation of countries it thinks into debt via slavery and colonialism. While many will be complicit with the Biden-Harris administration, I, as well as many others, will not sit idly by for a president who not only wants to fund the police several $100 million, not only does not see healthcare as something to be accessible to all, not only refuses to close ICE detention centers, let alone Guantanamo Bay, but ultimately does not wish to work with the Green New Deal, thus refuses to end fracking. Biden utilizes quote-unquote optics to garner the respect of the Republican Party and the GOP, demanding for a strong Republican Party, as he puts it. Let's be clear. We don't need a strong Republican Party, and at this rate, we don't even really need a strong Democratic Party. The Republican Party is already cooking up a new party called the Patriot Party. Something that has already occurred twice in history in the 1960s and 1980s, which consisted of paramilitary white supremacist Nazis. And considering the nature of the supporters of Donald Trump, this is no different. I do not have faith in steering Biden towards the left, for he must be militantly opposed, as we did with Donald Trump. Joe Biden, the grandfather of the war on drugs, is nothing but a white conservative in sheep's clothing. If your intentions for the past 4 years were to simply drive out Donald Trump from his seat in power and to call it a day, you have failed to understand the real problem at hand, when the possibility of another white fascist taking political power in the next 4 years is still on the table. I express my heart and soul in this piece, but I want to call upon one last soul who is no longer with us because of the Trump administration. Willem von Spronsen. This individual did not deserve to die. Let alone did he deserve to die alone. This individual attempted to free immigrants by killing ICE officers and attempting to set a concentration camp on fire in Tacoma, Washington. I made a video shortly after the event occurred, a video which is no longer online. The Secret Services arrived to many of my friends' houses, my job at the time, which I eventually lost, and then to me. The Secret Services made baseless claims that I wanted to shoot the United States President, Donald Trump. They claimed that I said I had a gun ready to kill Trump. To me, it's obvious what the situation was at hand here. They saw my YouTube channel as critical of the police, Trump, and the American empire, and viewed it as a threat to the state. Based on our conversation, they explicitly went after me instead of the white supremacists committing actual terrorism. They went after me instead of Baked Alaska, a Nazi YouTuber who stormed into the Capitol. They viewed an autistic trans woman who is deaf as a threat rather than the president, who, let's not forget that he incited a coup at the Capitol in order to overturn the election, because they were sworn to oath to protect the president. I don't care that they were just doing their jobs, because if they were really doing their jobs to protect us, they failed. If they were doing their job to protect the state, they failed. If their job was to protect democracy, they fucked up. Ultimately, as much as I resent Biden and Harris's administration, I'm glad to reflect on the dethroning of Donald Trump and Mike Pence. However, I am also thankful for the growth that I made in these last 4 years. I hate to be the one to say that stress builds character. I don't believe in that. But this definitely changed me for the better. One lesson that I learned was that violence is not the answer. The importance of anti-fascism is to defend the community from fascism, bigotry, and hateful violence. It is not to instigate that violence, but to protect those you love and care for in your community. All the emotions I've went through in the past 4 years had taken years to process, and I still will do so. But this is a pleasure to see Donald Trump become weakened in stature and finally exposed for what we all knew him for. A white, Christo-fascist, pedophilic, conspiracy-driven, neglectful, racist, sexist, homophobic, hateful, ultra-nationalistic, violent fuckface Mickey. Impeachment isn't enough. If hell exists, I hope he rots in it.